The 193 million acre National Forest System is an important part of America's resource base. The Forest Service manages these federal lands for continuous production of their renewable resources, which includes timber, clean water, wildlife habitat, forage for livestock, and outdoor recreation. Minerals are also an important resource of the national forests, and those 190 million acres mean that the national forests contain a significant percentage of America's remaining non-renewable stores of minerals. Within Arizona, prospecting for minerals dates back to 1854, when the Arizona Mining and Trading Company launched the modern era of hard rock mining in Ajo, Arizona. By the 1870s, hard rock mines were yielding large volumes of copper, lead, zinc, silver, and gold ore. Since then, Arizona has consistently been one of the top copper-producing states in America.
Let's fast forward to 1995 when a copper deposit was discovered within 2 miles of the Magma mine near the town of Superior. This ore deposit is located primarily on the Tonto National Forest. Over the next decade, Resolution Copper Mining, LLC submitted a general plan of operations for an underground copper mine to the Tonto National Forest, and Congress authorized a land exchange pending completion of the environmental impact statement as outlined in Section 3003 of the National Defense Authorization Act. In short, this act would provide the mining company with ownership to the land above the copper deposit. On August 9, 2019, the results of the Forest Service-led environmental review for these two related actions were released in the draft environmental impact statement, which is commonly referred to as a DEIS.
What are the key points one should take away from the draft environmental impact statement? Well, for starters, the DEIS cites the laws, the acts, and the Code of Federal Regulations that explain why the Forest Service prepared the draft environmental impact statement, as well as how it was prepared. Detailed information to help you become more familiar with the origins of the project is available in Chapter 1. During the scoping period in 2016, we heard of the two topics of most concern for the Forest Service to address: developing reasonable alternatives that could minimize effects to people and the environment, and to fully examine and disclose the magnitude of probable impacts from the project.
The Forest Service assessed alternative mining techniques in an effort to prevent subsidence. Resolution Copper proposes to use a mining technique known as panel or block caving to extract the ore. The Forest Service determined that no alternative mining methods were reasonable based on the character and depth of the ore body. The Forest Service also considered more than 30 alternatives for design and location of a tailings storage facility. Key variables included location, type of embankment or dam, and the water content of the tailings. Research of sites in central and southern Arizona narrowed the range of alternatives to 5 options at 4 separate locations, including 1 location not on federal land.
Combined with the required no-action alternatives, the Forest Service analyzed a total of 6 alternatives in the DEIS. These are described in Chapter 2. Environmental impacts and trade-offs among the action alternatives vary due to the differences in the tailings embankment design, the tailings deposition method, or the geographic location and affected surroundings of the proposed tailings storage facility. Tailings are the waste material left after the ore has been processed and the valuable minerals extracted. Tailings usually are stored as a slurry, a thick liquid comparable to a milkshake. In addition to different locations, we also looked at the type of embankment used to hold back the tailings. In recent years, several large tailings embankments have failed around the world. Resolution Copper originally proposed an upstream type of embankment. However, This type of embankment is rapidly losing favor in the mining industry worldwide. All of the alternatives analyzed in the draft environmental impact statement either use a modified centerline embankment or a centerline embankment.
Tailings can also vary in the amount of water they contain. As the water content of the tailings decreases, the solids content of the tailings increases. We selected alternatives that span a range of water content, with thickened tailings having the most water, ultra-thickened tailings having less water, and ultimately, filtered tailings having the least water. Filtered tailings, also known as dry stack tailings, have so little water content that they are handled as solids instead of liquid. The Forest Service has identified Alternative 6, Skunk Camp, as its preferred alternative. This alternative would move the tailings facility outside of the Superior Basin and further away from people. Skunk Camp involves no federal land, and the site is close to other mining activity. Alternative 6 would use thickened tailings and use a centerline embankment. However, because of the unique cross-valley construction, the embankment here is substantially shorter and more resilient to mishap than the other alternatives.
After we developed alternatives, we turned our attention to what kinds of direct, indirect, and cumulative impacts are likely to occur from the proposed mine plan and land exchange. We used the 15 issue-based resource topics identified during scoping to organize and disclose these likely effects. Let's take a closer look at these expected impacts, which are fully described in Chapter 3 of the draft EIS. The project would create up to 3,700 jobs and add about $1 billion per year to Arizona's economy, but may have negative impacts on property values, tourism, infrastructure, and emergency services. Air quality meets all national air standards at the project fence line, and the health impacts assessment did not raise concerns for cancer or non-cancer illnesses. A hiker in the Superstition Wilderness looking towards the mine might see a haze only about 5% of the time.
In regards to tribal values and cultural resources, the project would impact the Oak Flat traditional cultural property that is held sacred by the tribes, disrupt acorn collection from Emery oak groves, disturb human burials, and destroy sacred springs, and adversely impact archaeological sites, both prehistoric and historic, located in areas whether the ground is disturbed or covered by tailings. Measures that would reduce impacts to cultural resources are under development as part of a programmatic agreement between multiple federal agencies and state agencies, interested parties, and Resolution Copper.
Removal of the ore below Oak Flat will cause the ground surface to collapse, creating a subsidence crater. At the end of mining, the crater would be 1.8 miles across and up to 1,100 feet deep. Underground mining activities would not damage Apache Leap, Devil's Canyon, or US Highway 60.
Across the project area, between 10,000 and 17,000 acres of soil and vegetation could be disturbed by subsidence, placement of tailings, or construction of pipelines and utility corridors. These disturbed areas would revegetate slowly, with impacts to soil, health, and productivity lasting from centuries to millennia. The Forest Service is requiring a robust reclamation plan to lessen these impacts to desert soils and vegetation. There are federally listed species known to occur in the project area. The endangered Arizona hedgehog cactus may be impacted during operations at the East Plant site and by ground subsidence. The endangered western yellow-billed cuckoo could be impacted by changes in stream flow and associated riparian vegetation along Devil's Canyon. Resolution Copper will be required to follow terms and conditions identified by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to ensure protection of these endangered species.
There are several types of water-related impacts expected from extracting and producing 40 billion pounds of copper. Dewatering of underground mine facilities would affect from 14 to 16 sensitive springs or streams. Mitigation is proposed that would partially offset these groundwater impacts. The mine would pump between 180,000 and 590,000 acre-feet of water from the East Salt River Valley for the mine water supply. About half of this water is offset by recharge and recovery credits. Water quality is a concern due to seepage from the tailings facility. Alternatives 2, 3, and 4 appear problematic, while alternatives 5 and 6 have manageable water quality impacts. Several state and federal cooperating agencies have jurisdiction for issuing permits related to water quality, quantity, and use. Resolution Copper would be required to obtain all water-related permits and approvals prior to commencing project construction and operations.
Recreation is a popular use of the Tonto National Forest along U.S. Highway 60 and the town of Superior. Access to public lands and recreation opportunities would be eliminated permanently on 4,900 to 10,800 acres. The project would impact off-road vehicle routes, world-class climbing and bouldering areas, the Arizona Trail, and the Oak Flat Campground. Mitigation has been proposed that would partially offset these recreation impacts. The project is expected to affect visual quality and scenery in portions of the Tonto National Forest. The mine facilities, including the tailings storage area, would be visible from long distances. The change in contrast caused by land disturbance and vegetation removal, dust, and equipment would strongly impact the scenery viewed from some trails and highways.
The Forest Service examined the risk to public health and safety at each of the tailings embankment locations. All alternative designs are built to the same safety standards, but they differ in their resilience to unexpected events or upsets. Alternatives 2 and 3 are the least resilient because they use modified centerline embankments and have 10-mile-long freestanding embankments, and do not use separate storage cells for pyrite tailings. Alternative 6 is the most resilient, using a centerline embankment that is only 3 miles long and anchored on each side. These are some, but not all, of the impacts identified in the draft environmental impact statement. A comparison of impacts by alternative is available in Chapter 2, Section 2.5. Appendix E has a detailed alternatives impact summary.
In summary, the Forest Service would like to hear from you. This is your chance to keep the public in your public lands. To close this presentation, we'll now hear from the responsible official.
Hi, I'm Neil Bosworth, Forest Supervisor for the Tonto National Forest. It's a tremendous privilege and a tremendous responsibility to manage the largest national forest in Arizona. My duties include carefully balancing demands for economic prosperity with a commitment to environmental stewardship and sustainability. The Resolution Copper Project and Land Exchange is a current example. Without a doubt, this project has been one of the most complex and controversial projects of my career, weighing new jobs, economic growth, and production of metal in high demand against protecting public lands and resources for present and future generations. As the deciding official for this project, I will use information from the environmental impact statement, along with supporting documentation, to determine whether changes in the proposed mining plan are required prior to approval. Additionally, I will choose the alternative that best meets the purpose and need for this project while also minimizing environmental impacts. These are not decisions I take lightly. That's why it's so important for you, our stakeholders, and the public to provide insightful comments regarding the findings in the draft environmental impact statement. Between now and November 7th, I welcome your comments regarding the choice of preferred alternative, expected environmental impacts of the project, and/or the environmental review process itself. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.